And welcome to Rasa Office Hours with me, Rachel. I always said me, Rasa. My name is not Rasa. Uh, I'm gonna drink some coffee. And today I am here with Aryan, who is a success engineer. I believe is your job title on
Solution
um,
engineer, hopefully make people
solution engineer. That's right.
successful. Yes, yes.
I can make sure that
I
see
like
you
that
in the
better.
chats that I need
Success
to see.
engineer. I like that title.
Uh, so you're on the customer success
Correct.
team.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, is early for me, earlier for me than it is for you. And where? Oh, there it is. Okay, excellent. I was like, where's the stream? But the stream is going. We're good to go. That's why I'm looking over here behind my mic so that I can actually see all the chats. So, while we're waiting for folks to chime in with questions in the chat, um, I wanted to ask you some stuff to get us started. So, if you could give somebody who's building, let's say, their first Raza assistant one piece of advice, yes, what would that advice be?
I would say start with something small. Did you get it working quickly? And then by trial and error, build it out. And make sure you build tests for everything that you get working. I guess.
I think that's very solid advice.
Yes, and I actually I'm saying that because I did not follow my own advice in the beginning. I didn't build a test. I said, that's okay. I'll build those later, and I go, that's not the right way. I have to build tests.
Especially if you're going to be adding stuff, you want to make sure the stuff that you had before works.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Robbie says hi, Nick hi, or maybe Nick hi. Hello, hello, welcome to the chat. Yeah, so on the subject of tests, what are so the two sort of ways you could build tests in Raza is one, you could like write them by hand, or you could build them interactively in Raza X. Do you have a strong preference for one or the
Um, Not a strong preference. I think the initial test for the very simple, um, just write one by hand is fine.
other?
Typically, when you're just starting out building a bot, you do it from the command line in an editor anyway. So building a simple test flow by hand is just fine. But as you get more flows, more conversational, definitely Rasa X is the way to go.
And you can also use nice thing about doing that is that you can use actual, I mean, not every assistant has customers, but if you have customers, you can use their conversations as the test to make sure that it works for what it is that people.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Melinda says hi. Seaman says hi. Hello, welcome to the stream. Apologies if I say anybody's name wrong. Um, yeah, so your main pieces of advice, smart swell, build it out organically, make sure that you write tests. So waiting for more questions to come in from the chat. So if you have any, please feel free to um, add them in. So one thing that I think people run into quite a bit when testing is that Rasa test right the Rasa server, like the ability to have the conversation and understand the human generated text, but it doesn't test the actions. So how do you go about testing actions if you have fun, exciting things?
Yes. Well, I keep asking the developers to to allow me to run the action server at the same time. That's quite high on my wish list. To test the action server, the best way is to write unit tests. So you're actually writing a Python unit test to test your action server if you use Python for your action server. And then make sure that I think the hardest thing for the with the actions is you set slots, and if those slots are feature action server, are reflected in the story.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So if you have like, I'm working on a database lookup. Oh, stream has disconnected. I'm giving a few seconds to reconnect. I will stop some things. Sorry, you know, video anyway.
Yeah, no problem.
For that to try and try and see if that works. Okay, looks like we are back. Fantastic.
We're back. All right.
And hopefully we are back in the same stream and not a new URL, but I guess we'll find out. Nick wants to know, can you please suggest something you have worked on related to GraphDB for FAQs? How do you deal with large data sets to deal with FAQ question answers?
GraphDB, I have no experience with, so I can't really answer that. Large data sets. Rachel, your camera is still off.
Yes, so that's
okay.
I have a second camera so that Arjaan can see me in the Zoom, and that is off to preserve bandwidth because we've got some stability issues.
I just want to make sure. No, don't worry. So the question about the FAQs, large data sets. I'm not sure how many data points you have, how many sentences you have in your FAQ. But typically it handles it to a quite large amount. If you have an FAQ bot, looking at the response selector definitely would be an interesting option. Train the bot that way.
Yeah, I think Nick's asked a question previously, and as I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is also something that happens to other people as well. They were working with several hundred FAQs, and as a result, the intent classification was quite poor by the enormous number of classes, and not having, you know, a lot of training data for each example. So I think the database is for a little bit more of a lookup, perhaps, with of action.
Okay, so the problem was more on the accuracy of the predictions, and not as much as that the training takes a long time.
I imagine training also did take a while.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I mean, the best thing always is to try to keep the intents as different as possible, so there's no overlap between the intents, and then you need to have enough training data so the bot is able to learn about all these different intents. And then training data, if you do have access to a GPU, that will speed things up a lot. But if you have a lot of training data, yeah, you will have to live with some longer training times. That's just the way it is.
Yeah. Another question from Nick. Any other ways apart from using ngrok to deploy Rasa open source? So ngrok is what we recommend in our docs for like your small testing stages, but particularly the free version is definitely not designed for long-term deployment. And also you have to have the computer you're running it on and with the terminal window open.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you go from there?
Yeah, I mean, definitely when you're at the point that you have a bot that is beyond just, hey, you want to ask your friend to try it out, but you want to kind of put it out more in the open. The best way is to set up an account at one of the cloud providers and then set up a VM. Can be a small VM right there. It can be AWS, Google, DigitalOcean, and basically anywhere where you can start up a VM and then do an installation there. And then we have like several installation options for putting Rasa out there. I recommend to just install Rasa X. That's the most convenient way to deploy your bot. And then you have Rasa X there, you have the bot there, and you can open up the URL. And once you have Rasa X installed on the VM, then Rasa X has this share your bot feature. So once you have it on the VM, you get a URL that you can send to somebody for testing. And once you're really ready, you have it out there, and you just open up a full-fledged URL. You can even give it a domain name if you want, so etc.
Yeah, so renting time and space on somebody else's.
Yes, yep. I don't think the micro, like if you look over AWS and Google Cloud, they have some free VMs, but I don't think they are big enough to hold a Rasa bot. So you have to go to like a medium sized VM.
There's, I think also Heroku has like a option, but it is just too small to host
Exactly.
a Rasa open source instance, unfortunately.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, we recommend a minimum of 8 GB of RAM, and the free ones typically have only 1 GB of RAM.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could also like set up your own server rack in your physical location and handle that, but that's a lot of work, man.
Yeah.
Hamdi says, I love your courses on Kaggle, Rachel. Is it possible to share some of your work there again? Ooh, I guess so. The big problem with Kaggle is that it's not going to be, I mean, for sharing, Rasa assistants and stuff, is that it's not going to be able to handle, or at least last time I looked at it, it can't handle the file structure that you need to run an assistant, because it's like a flat notebook file. So probably not gonna do a whole bunch of stuff on Kaggle, but something might come up. So you never know.
I'd be able to.
Nick,
if you want.
You might be able to. As I remember, you can't like create files for your directory, which I think would make it a little rough. Like potentially possible, but
yeah. Okay.
It would be hacky. Nick wants to know, can you suggest some open source front end or GUIs that can be linked with Rasa, apart from Rasa Web Chat, which is a widget that somebody in our community built, which can be hosted on any website such as Wix or WordPress?
Yeah, we do have a recommended one of these widgets that you can easily put on websites. I forgot the name of it right now. Do you?
I think that might be Web Chat.
Is that yeah?
I'll pull it up.
I think it's Web Chat. Yes.
I think they were looking for something other. The one from BotFront, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the one that we're talking about that Nick was specifically looking for an alternative to.
Alternative to that one. I know that in our starter packs we have, is it called Chat Room?
Oh, it might be.
Where we use so if we have set up a demonstration of a handoff to a live agent, but of course we don't have a live agent in the loop, so we implemented a handoff from one bot to another bot, from the help desk bot to the financial demo bot, or backwards. And for that we used the chat room.
So I'm in the docs right now, the Rasa docs for the human off fallback handoff. But I don't widget thing.
Yeah, if you go to the in the chat, go to the financial demo GitHub repo. There you can see it's called chat. Yeah, there if you go down, you scroll down in the GitHub repo for financial demo, you see a screenshot of the chat room.
Scroll.
There we go.
The chat room. Yeah. Oh, and Krishna said BotFront. Yeah, so I don't think the chat room is from BotFront.
No,
Yeah, this is a fork of
scalable minds. Yeah.
so this would be one that we.
Yeah. So if you want to see how to use that, it actually the instructions are right there in the financial demo starter pack repo.
So give that a shot, Nick, and see if that will work for you. Yeah. All right. Next question. Data science. Alums, sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Are there any disadvantages of intent classification in response selector versus normal intent classification? Is there any improvements you can suggest for intent classification in response selector? I mean, there's one disadvantage that I know off the top of my head because I think it's not necessarily the intended. I don't know that I'd call it a bug, but I would call it like internet connection unstable. This might be a problem in the future. The traceback for the response selector intent detection is not very fleshed out in the debug log. So, FYI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think there's an open issue about that on our
GitHub. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I did a couple implementations while working with customers with the for the response selector, and one of the nice things I like about the response selector is that it's almost like a hierarchical intent classification. So you can have multiple response selectors in your bot. So first you use the diet classifier to predict to what response selector a sentence belongs to. So if there's a little bit of overlap or maybe confusion between some intents within a response selector, that doesn't impact that first step. So the die classifier will always predict correctly to what response selector a sentence then belongs to. And then the response selector is trained on a subset of intents. All right, so suppose that you have in total 20 intents. 10 intents belong to one response selector and 10 intents belong to the other response selector. Then first, diet will predict to what response selector it belongs, so to which of these 10. And then response selector does another further subselection. So that there is a good chance that if you would use just all the intents in a single diet classifier, it might get confused, but if you do it with two separate response selectors, it might actually do it better.
So hopefully that answers the question. Data science. And I'm saying that wrong. If anyone knows the International Phonetic Alphabet, if you put your name in with that, I can read that. Says, how do I stop Raza from doing intent classification from utterance? Like, suppose a form is activated, I want Raza to do slot filling in a sequential model rather than doing intent classification. Can we achieve this via rule?
The way to do that is with Rasa 2, in the domain, you can actually specify the mapping of the slots. And there you can do something. So for example, if so yeah, I would look at the in the domain.yaml for forms in Rasa 2. There's where you specify the directly a domain.
It's in here somewhere.
Somewhere.
I'll scroll.
Yeah.
There we go.
Forms. Kind of form, yeah, slot mapping. See right here you specify for cuisine. So in this case, the bot will only look for filling that slot if it can find an entity. If the bot extracts an entity. If it does not, then it will go off and it will try to actually see if that sentence predicts a certain intent. And if it does, yeah, it does what you don't want it to do. It actually will go that intent and maybe predict something. The way you can do that, the way you can avoid that is two ways. You can expand on this mapping logic. So there are more types. So you can say from text. If you add another item to that, so it's not only from entity but also from text, it will try to extract that slot just from the text. Another option is that maybe there are certain intents that you, well, actually, I think that should do it already. So just expand the option of the slot mapping, so it does not go into trying to predict a next action. The best one is to use the from text mapping. The sentence actually starts with that. The from text mapping will use the text of next user utterance to fill the slot. If you have that one in your mapping, it will always try to validate that slot. And if that slot validation then fails, it will ask again for that slot. So this is the solution to that question.
Yeah, I hope that that helps.
Yeah, and then one thing to add maybe, because very often this from text might actually be too broad. Because sometimes you say, well, I do want the bot to respond to certain intents, right? Suppose that you're in this form and the bot asks for a slot, like maybe cuisine, and you always want the bot to just interpret that user sentence and try to extract and validate the slot, except when the user says, I want to talk to the cook, right? I want to. So that's an intent you don't want to validate. So that's what that not intent is for. Yeah.
I mean, you could probably also do this, but you don't.
No, you don't need rules. The whole concept of the form is that you can avoid having to build complicated rule logic. And we tried to handle it just by staying in that loop where the bot is just asking for the slots, and you manage it with these type of things.
I hope that answers your question. Another question from Data Science says, well, actually, Krishna has a question. Can we integrate it with Teams? Talking about the interface, the little widget that we talked about, and Microsoft Teams would be my guess. So, what's the easiest way to integrate a front end with Microsoft Teams?
That actually I don't know. I only know it the other way around, where actually Teams was the front end. So then Teams is part of the Microsoft bot framework. There's actually also a documentation page for that. So yeah, so the Microsoft bot framework is supported as a connector, but Teams would be the front end. Yeah, there we go. There we go. So I don't know if you need another layer if you want to have a special widget on top of this. I understand that the bot framework here is pretty flexible. So within Teams you would build out the dialogue the way it's presented to the user.
I sort of guessed a little bit at what exactly you were asking. Um, but yeah, got the Microsoft Bot Framework documentation, and you might be able to use an existing thing instead of having to build your own. Data science and how says, how can we deal with spelling mistakes? That's my misreading. It was spelled perfectly fine. Appreciate any suggestions for the NLU pipeline. I tried Spacey spell check, but it didn't give the expected results.
Yeah, we get that question a lot. So I think the recommended approach is to stay away from spell checkers, although some people do build in spell checkers in the pipeline. One really good approach is to add a word count featurizer on character basis. So you typically would have two. What's the right return? Is it a word count featurizer? I believe so. And then
I think so, yeah.
And then you can configure that on character basis. So that typically helps with handling spelling errors. Count vector featurizer. That's it. Count vector featurizer. That's it.
There we go. Yeah, count vectors.
Yes.
This is actually from the... Okay.
Yeah. And then in your pipeline, right page components. There it is. You got it? There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this count vector featurizer, typically you have two of these in your pipeline, one on word basis and one on character basis. And if you do it on character basis, that helps to still handle misspellings pretty good. If just one letter is mistyped, or maybe an E and an I are flipped into I or E, that's handled then automatically. So stick that in your pipeline. And then the second recommendation is really look at the misspellings that don't work. So don't be too worried about trying to have everything correct right from the beginning. Typically, if there are misspellings in the domain that what your bot's working with, and your users typically make the same spelling mistakes all the time, and just stick them in your training data.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, spelling mistakes are not randomly distributed.
No.
And if they are truly randomly distributed, that is probably a bot talking to your bot, and probably you don't care about it.
Yeah, so that's our recommendation. Put this count vector featurizer in the pipeline, and then bit by bit monitor your conversations, and bit by bit just add the spellings in there. And it should work itself out over time.
Way that answers your question, data science. And that should work as well for it's probably not going to work really well for like Chinese, but any language where you can have spelling mistakes. I guess it's not going to be relevant for pictographic languages.
Yeah.
Never mind. Ignore that tangent. MD says, can you give us a roadmap from data science model to model deployment? Many people can create the model and win the competition, but when it comes to production, they become... I mean, that's the career of machine learning engineering. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a series on Kaggle a while ago about building an API for a model that goes through some of the steps that might be relevant. I don't remember what it was called. I think it was like productionization workshop or something. But
yeah. There is a on Udemy. There is actually a deployment workshop.
Oh, interesting.
Out there. So that focuses on a Kubernetes-based deployment. So that might be a good start.
The Rasa Advanced Deployment Workshop?
Yes, yeah. I actually did that one. Yeah.
And it's on sale.
Yeah. That workshop will show you all the steps to deploy your bot on a VM. In the environment used in the workshop is Google Cloud, but it translates over very easy to other cloud environments. And it just explains how you install in Kubernetes and how you expose it to the rest of the world.
So check it out. Nick says, I would suggest Rasa web chat rather than chat room. I've experimented with both, but will recommend web chat. It has all the available pieces, such as buttons, ad carousels, image, video, etc. A piece of advice for the person who's asking about front ends.
Yeah, appreciate that feedback.
Nick says, is there any code for automatic spell check? I think we sort of talked about that a little bit. Or arrow key type, class type query on text message area by customer, which can save the time of the customer to retype the query again or only change a few keywords for the query they are looking for. Okay, so this is things like, like when you're in the terminal and you're typing and you're like, oh, I want to do the last thing again. You use the up arrow and it goes back through the memory and picks the last thing you did.
Yeah, I think that really just depends on the front end you're using. I mean, Rasa does. So Rasa just gets all the time independent sentences, but how these sentences are generated. Yeah, if a front end allows you to scroll back in previous ones. I've seen implementations of a front end where the user could go back, like use the scroll bar, go back and then click on a button of a previous question, and Rasa just handles that fine. And it would be the same with the command line. If the front end would allow you to scroll back through previous sentences and then type it in again, that should be okay.
Yeah, because it's all that information's in the tracker store.
Yeah.
Just like, is there a way for a user to interact with that?
Right.
Possible, but we haven't built it, I think is the answer to that question.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Henry says, thanks. It's a fair pronunciation of my name. Thank you. I appreciate your grace on that. Nick says, can we only use stories rather than rules in the new version? What is the best practice you would suggest? That is, I would say, start with stories, and if they're not doing it for you, then add rules. I mean, the big problem with rules is start with a couple rules, then you add a couple more rules, and then you have rules depending on other rules, and then you have this big, huge, like, state machine, right? The thing that Rasa was built to try and replace, where it's really hard to edit things and add new training data and have a flexible system that can handle new types of stuff. And sometimes you might need that if you have, like, a specific authentication flow or something like that. But my recommendation is to stay with stories for as far as you can and rules. I don't know. What would you say, Arjaan?
I like rules a lot for single turn interactions. So if you have like a greet, auto greet, or these really simple rules where you have an intent, an action. I think their rules are really nice, because then you don't have to. One nice thing about rules is that it doesn't matter about the context of the story; those rules will always work. So these short rules, I'm a big fan of. You also need rules, or I always use rules to activate the form. And when a form has ended, what then to do? So those are the three things I use rules for very short interaction at turns, and activate the form and submit a form. For anything else, I use story.
Yeah, I think that tracks with what I do. Although I think for some very short interactions, I'll just add more stories.
All right. Yeah. I mean, if I fully agree what you said about if you have a tendency to go rules first, that's definitely not a good approach, because very quickly you end up with rules that are conflicting, and you have to build conditions on top of rules, and it becomes very confusing and unmaintainable. And you don't have the problem with stories. So rules they're tempting because it appears that it's simpler or small, or that they're more compact or smaller, which is true, but it becomes unmanageable. And stories, they're more verbose, but they're very easy to understand and maintain.
I think it's I have a data science machine learning background, so my solution is always more data.
Yeah.
It says, will bot framework be built on Rasa? I think this is referring to the Microsoft bot framework. I think you can integrate them. I don't know that the Microsoft team is really focused on Rasa support necessarily. I don't know. Have you talked with anyone?
No. I only know the Microsoft bot framework as really just as a almost like a toolkit that works with all the Microsoft tools like Teams, and I don't know if you can use it with Skype. I don't know. Like this toolkit as a connector to connect to other tools like Rasa.
You want to expand on that question? Happy to. Charlie says, when I list intent :x and not underscore intent :y under a form, it still fills the slot value from intent y, so not intent, which was specified in the form, which is listed as not intent. Ooh.
Maybe that would be a good one to post in the forum, or if it's really if I understand the description correct, then here's that it's not doing what it's supposed to do. So maybe there's a little logic bug in the form. That's also possible. So maybe maybe put it in the forum, or if you have it already well tested, you can create an issue in the Rasa GitHub. That would be very much appreciated, actually. If you find something that, hey, it doesn't work, create an issue in the Rasa GitHub. So yeah, issues. Yeah.
So it's github.com/RasaHQ/Rasa/issue.
Yeah.
And you can see what brought up as well.
Yeah. And if you scroll up a little bit, there's that new issue button. Yeah, right there. And so there's some little template is available. So if you never have created an issue,
looked me up in the past.
Yeah, those are sometimes tricky. These slot mappings, I stumbled quite a bit there to get that right.
Nick says, does Rasa open source or Rasa X have the capabilities of self-learning from user/bot conversations, or can store or update the same in the knowledge base?
Your voice went away midway.
Stream is disconnected.
You're good again, but I didn't hear the first part of the question.
I'm gonna let the chat know that we have connection issues again. But just to... Oh, okay, I think we're back. Fantastic. So the question was, basically, can you have can you learn from user conversations with Rasa open source or Rasa X? And can you store those conversations as well? And the answer is yes. That's what Rasa X is for.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So, yeah, that's I would say that's kind of the main purpose of why Rasa X was developed to create this environment where all user conversations flow to, and then as a bot developer, you can look at these conversations and create training data, create test stories, and iteratively improve your bot. So we have a term for that. It's the conversation-driven development of your bots.
We have quite a bit of learning materials that we pulled together. So section docs about it. If you're interested in sort of like our approach to it and our recommendations for how to do it. And I will say it doesn't happen automatically. There's a little bit of human in the loop where we recommend that you like annotate and make sure that the training data is right. Because training your bot to continue to do wrong things is not going to make anybody happy. But yeah, so definitely it's something we think is really, really important. Question from Rude says, can you please help on various Rasa commands to dig in more to see the backend modeling stats? I know about Rasa Shell NLU, Rasa Shell Debug, Rasa Interactive, any other commands? The one that's validate?
Yes, you have a Rasa validate that checks your training data. Validate's a good one. And then of course you have the Rasa test, which runs the test.
And then visualize can also be helpful. It generates a little tree structure of your conversation so you can see on.
Yeah, I never used that one. I look always in Rasa X, look at the stories. There's a little tree there as well. Yeah.
Yes, there's like a model validation thing in the command line as well. Right? Am I making that up?
That's the Rasa data validate, right?
Is data validate and validate the same?
Yeah. Rasa data validate.
Okay, I thought it used to have a different name, but it is very possible that I am just misremembering things.
Okay. Yeah. The ones I always use, the one I have memorized is Rasa train, Rasa shell, Rasa test, and sometimes Rasa data validate. Rasa train automatically already does the Rasa data validate, or you'll get the same error. Not using that much.
There, we have a flag for getting out.
Slash, yeah, dash
debug plots. That's what I was thinking about.
Ah, okay.
I was like, I know there's a way to get like validation charts. It's
okay.
This debug plots flag.
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and that's also in Rasa shell. Can you go to Rasa shell?
Mm-hmm.
Because there too, the one that I use all the time is the dash debug. That's the one that gives you so much information about what the bot is actually doing, that if anytime I have a strange behavior, I go into Rasa shell debug, and you can really see what the bot's doing, what slots are being set, what's in the tracker, what it is predicting that you're not expecting, and what policy is doing that prediction, and that really helps you to zoom in on the issue that you have.
Fine. And also, if you're making a post on the forums, the logs from debug are really, really helpful.
Yes, yes.
I think SHB says, hi, Rachel. Hey, welcome to the stream. And Hamdi says, best way to build domain num. If you really want to build something that works well, and your like data scarcity is a major issue, you might need to use the older techniques. Like I've seen some work with like rule-based systems or like things like context-free grammars with in instances where like there's not a lot of language data for specific language, so that's an option. The book I always recommend is Speech and Language Processing. I'll put that up. Oh, and we have a YouTube series, NLP for Developers, that goes through some stuff that might be relevant as well. Oh, stream is disconnected. Love that.
You're
really
disconnected.
Huge fan.
Disconnected again?
Yeah.
Oh, there.
I think it's just bandwidth in my apartment building is a little tight today. All right, and we're back. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any recommendations for building domain?
No, I always just think back about what's the best way to train your bot or to make your bot smarter is by collecting real conversations. And there's really not a shortcut to that, I think.
No, I'd agree.
Yeah, so getting your bot out there and have people talk to it and collect real conversations, real sentences, and group these sentences in sensible intent. That's the way you build a good bot.
Collecting data from your eventual end users also helps you avoid the thing where you train with data in one domain and people don't talk like that to yourself.
Yeah. Another interesting example of that is you might build a bot within a certain domain, but it's designed for text-based input, and then you put now I can put a voice to text logic in front of it, and suddenly the bot doesn't work anymore because people say things differently, and even though it's the same domain, the way people talk to it is a little bit different, and you might need to do something. You might have to add different sentences or more sentences in it. So, and it follows the same logic. Yeah, your bot needs to be able to learn to understand how the people talk to it. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That you're not always going to necessarily, and things will change over time. Not only with you changing the way that people interact with the assistant, but also like as the world changes or as language changes.
Yeah, and I think the way people interact with bots will also change. I think today people still think often of as a bot as, oh, I have to say one word sentence like operator or that. I still see that a lot, and it's actually not the best way for bots to understand you. So maybe over time people learn to use a little bit more verbose sentences when they ask something.
Yeah, I hope that helps, Hamdi. Data science. Ellen again says story versus rule. When we have a lengthy static flow, what do you recommend, a story or a rule? Specifically in a case someone is not allowed to jump into the flow in a middle step. I mean, if you're collecting pieces of information, I would put that in a form.
Right.
I guess how important is it? Sorry, go ahead, Arjaan. I'm just thinking.
I'm also thinking about what maybe a concrete example is we needed, that users not allowed to jump in the middle. What exactly does that mean?
So the things I'm thinking about are stories are training data for your assistant to guess, right? And if the person is doing exactly the same thing as you see in your training story, you'll just continue to step through the story, right? That's what the memoization means. For this example where you don't want the story to be treated as chunks, I would, if you have an augmented memoization policy, I would remove that. First of all, I think that'll help. And you could also a negative rule, like don't show this utterance until these other things have been fulfilled.
Yes, you can. That's what I was thinking too. So if it's, so I definitely, I mean, what triggered me was say it's lengthy. If it's lengthy, you have to have a story. Don't try to capture that with rules. If you might want to set up negative rules, conditional negative rules, that a certain intent cannot, will not trigger an action unless something had already happened before it. Maybe with a slot. So yeah, you could maybe use some slots. That we don't have a real example, but if you would have a story that every time triggers an action, in these actions you can keep track of a slot, and then you have a conditional rule that if the user utters an intent, but that intent, if you have a story, if you work with custom actions, and in the custom action you can always build something in. Right? So if just put an if statement in there, that if the user uttered an intent but didn't follow the story, build in an if statement in your custom action that explains that to the user and get them back on track.
Yeah, that's another good point. And Jolly says, can you please suggest a pipeline that helps to extract names from your input? Any pipeline which could extract the names which are not mentioned in the nlu.yaml file as well. These are examples where you're trying to get specific pieces of information.
Your voice broke off. There's something with entity extraction, I understand.
Sorry, I can pull this in a little bit closer and talk a little bit louder. So name extraction. Actually, I think Vincent just did a video about it. Oh, stream has disconnected.
Yeah.
Vincent just did a video about it.
About name extraction?
Yeah. But I don't think it's called name extraction. I think it's called... I think it's called, like, memory and slots, maybe?
Hi.
I'm trying not to...
I mean, was the question about the names of people?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, we're back. Sorry for the... Hopefully the connection issues are not coming through on the stream, but they are coming through to me, and they're very frustrating. So the memory and slots in Raza tutorial video goes through an example of ways that you can handle names, human name, human given name.
Yeah, I mean, if a really nice way to extract names is with Spacie, and Spacie is very good in extracting names of people, and then they go into a slot. So the slot is uppercase person.
Cool. I'm gonna stick the video that I just mentioned into the YouTube chat as well.
Okay.
So hopefully that helps on Jolly.
Yeah, and then also we can always recommend look at the starter packs, like Sarah, Help Desk, Financial Demo. I think Financial Demo does also a pretty good job on demonstrating how you extract the name entity from sentences, how you extract dollar amounts from sentences. Those type of things are explained there.
I wonder where they're linked to in the blog. Not the blog, in the...
I think on the main page of Rasa. If you just go to rasa.com, they're right there.
When I start typing Rasa, I immediately go to the docs. Which I think tells you a little bit of something about what I do day to day.
Maybe it is in the docs. I think where it is. I think
here's one of the starter packs. Yeah. So they're all under Rasa projects in the Rasa show.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Hopefully that'll. Oh. Huh? So we probably have time for a couple more questions. Nick says, which conversation flow between user bot would you suggest text-based or button-based or a combination of both? If both, what percentage? Oh, like when to use buttons and when to use text.
I would say, yeah, it's a design question. I agree. It's if you really have only 2 options, 3 options, then a button approach, I think, is very useful and quick. And by the way, having buttons does not prevent a user from still typing it in. So if you have a yes, no, the user can still type in yes, no. Because what happens with a button, if you click on it, then the button sends the actual intent to Rasa. But if the user types in yes, then the sentence yes goes to Rasa. And Rasa NLU makes yes intent out of it, and the same thing happens.
Yeah. I would say for me, the places where I think buttons make a lot of sense are when people are going to need to move through or want to move through the assistant very quickly, because typing buttons is faster than hitting a button is faster than entering text. So particularly if you know that people are going to be using mobile primarily, I might go with buttons there. Or if yeah, I think like speed is if you're working with a population that like Arjaan mentioned isn't very comfortable talking to bots and they tend to use like one words, then buttons might also be more helpful for that population. You'll notice that when you start reviewing your conversations, if that's happening or not.
Yeah. Or if you want to limit what the user actually can provide. So you do see that a lot as well in insurance bots or healthcare bots, that there's just a limited list of options that you allow the user to pick from. And then just open-ended text input would not work for that. So then you would provide a list of buttons.
Sorry, somebody asked something that I have the answer to in a video, so I was putting a link to the video.
Okay.
All right, I think this might be our last question for the day from Anirudh. I have a 2-digit number which goes to one intent and a 7-digit number which goes to another intent, but the diet classifier interchanges the intent. Any pipeline changes to predict intents correctly? I would treat those as entities.
Yep.
I think that'll help.
Yes. Yeah. Don't try to handle that and with entity extraction.
Oh, my internet connection is unstable. You don't say. You cut out there a little bit, but I think what you're saying, adding entity extraction will help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, there's something like that would be also great to just post to the forum with a concrete example. That's always a good thing to do.
And we've got the forum link. So that's the forum. We do our best to answer questions. We also have a really great community and folks who are really good about helping out. So, all right. So it is past the 10 o'clock mark, which is when the stream ends, and also my internet is squeezing under the load of the stream today, apparently.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining today, Arjaan.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll do
We
it
got through a
again.
lot of questions.
Yeah.
I'll tap you when I have an empty space in the schedule.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you very much. Thank everybody for asking questions.
Yeah, definitely. Really good questions today.
Yeah.
Lots of hard ones.
All right. See you.
I will be back tomorrow with paper reading, on Friday with live coding. Y'all on